Nelson Mandela was born on 18 July 1918 in Mvezo, a tiny village in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. Born into the Madiba clan of the Tembu people, a subgroup of the Xhosa nation, Mandela was of royal lineage. His father, Godla Henry Mafekanyiswa, was the local chief and counselor to the Thembu king, while his mother, Nosekeni Fanny, was one of Godla's 4 wives. Mandela's early years were steeped in the oral traditions of his ancestors, who shared stories of bravery and resistance against colonial encroachment. His given name, Rolihlahla, means pulling the branch of a tree, a metaphor for a troublemaker. At age 7, he was sent to a Methodist school where a teacher gave him the English name Nelson, following colonial custom. This subtle cultural erasure would be among the early symbols of the oppression he would later fight. When his father died in 1927, Mandela was sent to live with Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo, the Thembu regent, in Kunu and later Mthatha. There, he enjoyed a relatively privileged upbringing for a black child under colonial rule. Yet he was exposed early to the systemic injustices plaguing black South Africans. Raised alongside the regent's children, Mandela learned about governance, leadership, and diplomacy, foundations that would later serve his political career. Mandela's formal education began at Clarkbury Institute, continued at Healdtown, and culminated in his admission to the University of Fort Hare, then the only Western-style university for black South Africans. There, he studied English, anthropology, and native administration. At Fort Hare, Mandela began to experience the institutionalized racism of apartheid firsthand and joined student protests against restrictive policies. For participating in a boycott of university elections, he was suspended in 1940. Upon returning home, Jongintaba arranged a marriage for him. Refusing to submit, Mandela fled to Johannesburg in 1941. There, he worked as a security guard and later a clerk while completing his degree by correspondence from UNISA. He enrolled in law at University of the Witwatersrand, where he was the only black student in his class, often facing racism but also making vital political connections. It was in Johannesburg that Mandela met Walter Sisulu, who introduced him to the African National Congress, ANC, and to other key figures like Oliver Tambo. Exposure to diverse political ideologies, African nationalism, liberalism, socialism, helped shape his belief in a multiracial, democratic South Africa. Mandela joined the ANC in 1943. Alongside Sisulu, Tambo, and Anton Lembede, he co-founded the ANC Youth League, ANCYL, in 1944. The Youth League introduced a new era of militant African nationalism, challenging the ANC's conservative leadership. Mandela married Evelyn Mace, a nurse and cousin of Sisulu, in the same year. They would have 4 children together, though their marriage later ended due to political strain. In 1949, the Youth League's program of action was adopted by the ANC, marking a radical shift toward mass mobilization, strikes, boycotts, and civil disobedience. Mandela emerged as a charismatic speaker and organizer. By the early 1950s, he was the face of the Defiance Campaign, which saw over 8,000 volunteers arrested for violating apartheid laws. Despite increasing state repression, Mandela co-founded South Africa's first black law firm, Mandela and Tambo, offering legal aid to black clients otherwise without recourse. His growing activism earned him a series of banning orders, restricting his movement and speech. In 1955, the ANC convened the Congress of the People in Kliptown, which adopted the Freedom Charter, a visionary document declaring that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. It envisioned a multiracial democracy, land redistribution, free education, and labor rights. Mandela helped draft and promote the charter, despite growing surveillance. In 1956, Mandela and 155 others were arrested and charged with treason. The treason trial dragged on for 5 years, ending in 1961 with all accused acquitted. Though Mandela remained free, the government's intent was clear: to exhaust and dismantle the leadership of the liberation movement. Mandela's personal life grew more complex. His marriage to Evelyn ended in divorce in 1958. That same year, he married Winnie Madikizela, a dynamic and politically engaged social worker. Their relationship, passionate but troubled, would become symbolic of the sacrifices demanded by the struggle. The 1960 Sharpeville massacre, where police killed 69 unarmed protesters, was a watershed moment. The apartheid government responded by banning the ANC and other political organizations. Mandela, recognizing the limits of peaceful protest, turned to armed resistance. He co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, MK, the armed wing of the ANC, and became its first commander-in-chief. MK launched sabotage operations aimed at government infrastructure, avoiding civilian targets. Mandela went underground, earning the nickname Black Pimpernel for eluding police capture. In 1962, Mandela secretly left the country to seek international support and military training. Upon returning, he was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison for inciting strikes and leaving the country illegally. But greater charges loom. In 1963, police raided Lily's Leaf Farm in Rivonia, uncovering MK documents. Mandela and several others were charged with sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the state. During the Rivonia trial, Mandela delivered a 4-hour speech from the dock, concluding with the iconic words, "It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." On 12th of June, 1964, Mandela and 7 others were sentenced to life imprisonment. He was sent to Robben Island, where he would remain for 18 years under brutal conditions. Prisoners crushed rocks under the sun, endured racial segregation even behind bars, and were allowed minimal contact with family. Despite the hardship, Mandela became a leader among prisoners, educating them, organizing resistance, and maintaining discipline. He rejected several offers of conditional release that demanded he renounce armed struggle. During Mandela's imprisonment, the global anti-apartheid movement gained traction. Protests, boycotts, and sanctions isolated South Africa diplomatically and economically. Artists, athletes, and governments rallied to the Free Mandela cause. Inside prison, Mandela earned the respect of wardens and inmates alike. In 1982, he was moved to Pollsmoor Prison and later to Victor Verster Prison, where conditions improved. Secret talks began between Mandela and the apartheid government, initiated by President P.W. Botha and continued under F.W. de Klerk. 8. Freedom and transition to democracy. On the 11th of February 1990, after 27 years of imprisonment, Mandela walked free. His first speech called for peace, unity, and continued resistance. He insisted that the ANC remain committed to negotiation, not revenge. Mandela led the ANC through 4 tumultuous years of talks. The country teetered on the edge of civil war, with political violence threatening the fragile peace process. Yet Mandela, guided by principles of reconciliation and inclusion, pressed forward. In 1993, Mandela and de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. On 27th of April 1994, South Africans of all races voted for the first time. The ANC won, and on the 10th of May 1994, Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as South Africa's first black president. Mandela's presidency, 1994-1999, prioritized reconciliation, nation-building, and institutional reform. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, chaired by Desmond Tutu, allowing perpetrators of apartheid-era crimes to confess in exchange for amnesty. While controversial, it helped the country confront its past. Mandela focused on education, housing, healthcare, and economic inclusion through the Reconstruction and Development Program, RDP. He also symbolized racial unity, famously supporting the mostly white Springbok rugby team during the 1995 World Cup, a gesture that helped bridge racial divides. He declined a second term, setting a powerful later years and personal reflections. Mandela retired from active politics in 1999 but remained a global statesman. He championed HIV/AIDS awareness, spoke out for peace in conflict zones, and established the Nelson Mandela Foundation. His personal life, however, bore scars. His marriage to Winnie ended in divorce in 1996, amid allegations of infidelity and political differences. In 1998, he married Graça Machel, widow of Mozambican President Samora Machel. Mandela's later years were marked by health challenges. He passed away on 5 December 2013 at age 95. South Africa and the world mourned a man whose life embodied resilience, justice, and forgiveness. Mandela's legacy transcends South Africa. He remains a global symbol of resistance against oppression, of reconciliation in the aftermath of hatred, and of leadership rooted in moral clarity. While his presidency didn't eliminate economic inequality, it laid the groundwork for constitutional democracy. His insistence on forgiveness over vengeance changed the trajectory of a nation. Mandela taught the world that power, when tempered by empathy, can heal even the deepest wounds. His life remains an enduring testament to the power of hope and the resilience of the human spirit. I am not a saint, unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying. Nelson Mandela.
At the core of Mandela's political ideology was a belief in human dignity, equality, and dialogue over destruction. Although he endorsed armed resistance at one point in response to apartheid's violent oppression, Mandela remained fundamentally committed to negotiation and inclusion. He rejected ideological extremism, choosing instead to work with a broad coalition liberals, communists, African nationalists, and international allies. Mandela did not advocate for racial revenge. Even during his presidency, he resisted pressure to dismantle the wealth and privilege of white South Africans, preferring reconciliation over redistribution. He said, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." He saw democracy not as a single event, but as a process requiring vigilance, participation, and empathy. He promoted a vision of a rainbow nation, a country united in its diversity and committed to constitutional rule. He helped draft a progressive constitution, enshrining civil liberties, freedom of speech, gender equality, and minority rights. Mandela was not without critics. Some on the left believed he was too accommodating to white capital. Others thought his focus on unity diluted more transformative socioeconomic policies. But Mandela remained steadfast in his belief that peace and democracy were the indispensable foundations of lasting change. After stepping down in 1999, Mandela became one of the world's most respected elder statesmen. He lent his voice and credibility to global causes, HIV/AIDS awareness, peace negotiations, and development initiatives. His son, Makatho, died of AIDS-related complications in 2005, prompting Mandela to speak openly about the disease in a society plagued by stigma. He founded the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which promotes human rights, education, and social justice. Mandela's passing in 2013 was followed by 10 days of national mourning. More than 90 world leaders attended his memorial, including U.S. Presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, Cuban leader Raul Castro, and many others. Yet his legacy in South Africa remains complex. While political freedom was achieved, economic inequality persists. The ANC has faced criticism for corruption, cronyism, and failing to deliver promised land and housing reforms. Many South Africans, especially the youth, feel disconnected from the dream Mandela embodied. Still, Mandela's moral authority remains intact. His commitment to justice without revenge, democracy without exclusion, and service without entitlement stands as a benchmark for integrity in leadership. Statues of Mandela stand not only in South Africa, but in London's Parliament Square, New York's UN headquarters, and Washington, D.C. His name adorns schools, hospitals, streets, and foundations. His birthday, July 18th, is commemorated globally as Nelson Mandela International Day, a call for 67 minutes of community service, reflecting his 67 years of public service. Many global leaders have paid tribute to Mandela's humility and wisdom. President Barack Obama, in his eulogy, said, "He makes me want to be a better man." Desmond Tutu described him as a moral colossus. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said Mandela taught us that no one is beyond redemption. Mandela's ability to engage with adversaries, whether Afrikaner generals or Western leaders who once branded him a terrorist, underscored his belief in the power of dialogue and transformation. Mandela's life was also commemorated in art, literature, music, and film. His autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, became a bestseller and was adapted into a feature film. Musicians like U2, Johnny Clegg, and Hugh Masekela celebrated him in song. He became a cultural icon across generations. Mandela's story holds lessons for every age. That freedom is never given. It is won through struggle, sacrifice, and solidarity. That reconciliation is not passive. It requires courage, justice, and hard choices. That leadership demands humility, service, and integrity. In a world increasingly divided by nationalism, xenophobia, and authoritarianism, Mandela's legacy is a North Star. He showed that moral authority can outweigh military power, that even in bitterness, we can choose dignity. He once said, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others." Nelson Mandela's walk to freedom did not end with his release from prison or his election as president. It continues today, in classrooms and courtrooms, in parliaments and protests, in every act of courage that affirms the dignity of all people. He was not a saint, nor did he pretend to be. He made mistakes, lived through personal flaws, and occasionally doubted his own strength. But he always returned to principle, to justice, and to hope. Mandela's life is more than biography. It is a guidebook, a legacy not carved in stone, but written in the shared efforts of those who still dream of a better world. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. Nelson Mandela's influence stretched far beyond South Africa's borders. His commitment to diplomacy, human rights, and multilateral cooperation reshaped the global perception of post-colonial leadership. During his presidency and long after, Mandela inspired reformers, presidents, and grassroots activists across continents, from Northern Ireland to the Middle East, from Latin America to Southeast Asia. He was a consistent advocate for the United Nations and championed international mechanisms for human rights protection, including the International Criminal Court, ICC. Mandela frequently reminded leaders that lasting peace could only be achieved through truth, reconciliation, and accountability. He believed in the moral obligation of states to intervene peacefully and lawfully when human rights were threatened. His calls for unity during ethnic conflicts, such as those in Rwanda, the Balkans, and Darfur, underscored his global moral authority. In recognition of his contribution to peace and international diplomacy, Mandela received more than 250 awards, including the Order of Merit from the UK, Presidential Medal of Freedom from the US, and Bharat Ratna, India's highest civilian honor. His international visits, especially to countries previously hostile to the ANC, signaled a new era in South Africa's foreign policy based on multilateralism, human rights, and regional cooperation. He reimagined diplomacy not merely as a strategic necessity, but as a moral enterprise, a space for trust building, inclusion, and historical repair. Nelson Mandela's influence stretched far beyond South Africa's borders. His commitment to diplomacy, human rights, and multilateral cooperation reshaped the global perception of post-colonial leadership. During his presidency and long after, Mandela inspired reformers, presidents, and grassroots activists across continents, from Northern Ireland to the Middle East, from Latin America to Southeast Asia. He was a consistent advocate for the United Nations and championed international mechanisms for human rights protection, including the International Criminal Court, ICC. Mandela frequently reminded leaders that lasting peace could only be achieved through truth, reconciliation, and accountability. He believed in the moral obligation of states to intervene peacefully and lawfully when human rights were threatened. His calls for unity during ethnic conflicts, such as those in Rwanda, the Balkans, and Darfur, underscored his global moral authority. In recognition of his contribution to peace and international diplomacy, Mandela received more than 250 awards, including the Order of Merit from the UK, Presidential Medal of Freedom from the US, and Bharat Ratna, India's highest civilian honor. His international visits, especially to countries previously hostile to the ANC, signaled a new era in South Africa's foreign policy based on multilateralism, human rights, and regional cooperation. He reimagined diplomacy not merely as a strategic necessity, but as a moral enterprise, a space for trust building, inclusion, and historical repair.